I'm so excited that you've taken time out to tune in to the Ella Johnson Show. I hope that you enjoy the broadcast. I hope you'll laugh. I hope you'll cry. But I hope that you'll be moved by what you hear. Well, my guests are very special to me, and so are you. So I want you to sit back, enjoy the show. What you can become depends on what you can overcome. Yes, I'm so excited about my children's book that's coming out, and I'm looking for some mahogany kids. I'll tell you about that later. It's time for the Ella Johnson Show.
From Bridgeport today called for an investigation into the hiring practices at the city's police department. State Representative Charlie Stallworth says the department's application process does not give fair consideration to minority and female candidates.
I truly believe that the application process is both racist and sexist.
Stallworth says the vast majority, if not all of those who were turned down, were either minority or female applicants.
Dr. King said it before that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. The makeup of the police department for the city of Bridgeport is not a reflection of the makeup of the population. It is not a reflection in any way.
Listen, wherever you are, let me just take a moment and chat right with you. That whatever you're going through, whatever your struggle is, holding your head down won't get you through it. But one good step to engage in right now, if there's not anything else you can do, is tell the Lord, thank you. Thank you brought me this far. Thank you that you kept me. And thank you, God, that I'm going to make it through this. Because whatever this moment is has not stopped me and will not stop me.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Ella Johnson Show. Aren't you guys all pumped up now? I think you got them already pumped up, Dr. Stallworth. I think so. I think so. Yeah, because you just looked in that camera and you just told them what it is. Listen, thank you guys so much for tuning into the Ella Johnson Show. If you are watching from Facebook, just do me a tiny favor. Just share the broadcast so that all of your family and friends will be able to enjoy this broadcast tonight. Now, if you're watching from YouTube, I appreciate you so much, but please do me a favor and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss any more of my shows. Well, listen, I am so excited about tonight because, as you know, we are still talking about the petition. And one of my Native friends is here with us tonight so that he can weigh in on what he thinks about the petition. Now, I want you guys to get excited about this podcast, and I want you to be a part of it. So if you're sitting there, you're watching, and you just have a question that you'd like to ask Dr. Charlie Stallworth, please, by all means, just put it in the comment section. and we'll make sure that he sees it. But your comments, whatever you're putting there, it may show up on the screen from time to time because we want to make sure that you feel like you're part of the broadcast. So I just want you guys to know that the petition is strong. It's gaining a lot of attention. Of course, you already know that it's gaining the attention of Pete Early, and he's going to be on the broadcast next week. You don't want to miss that. But tonight, I'm sitting here with one of my friends from Beatrice, J.F. Shields. I love somebody that, when they leave and they come back, they're not afraid to say, yeah, from Beatrice. He could say Monroeville, because Monroe was bigger, right? But we're very excited to have him on the show. And this is what I want you guys to think about. With the petition, it's very important for us to understand that Johnny D will not be completely exonerated, okay, until the murderer of Ronda Morrison is found, charged, and put in jail, prison, whatever the case may be. That process still needs to go. It's not finished. This is not about trying to bring up old wounds or anything, but this is not resolved and it needs to be. And I want you guys to think about it. Bertha Morrison, Rhonda's mom, she was just recently in the Monroe Journal, and she was excited because, she's like, listen, I want you guys to know this thing is still alive for me. So even she is still looking for answers. So if all of us can come together and do what's right, what can be wrong with that? Now, let me tell you about my guest tonight, Dr. C.L. Stallworth. He is a graduate of J.F. Shields. Right here in Monroe County, yes. J.F. Shields was like one of our rivals, but we always won. You understand that. We just love to talk about that every chance we get. But he has 4 children, 5 grandchildren. Now, at Selma University, he got his Bachelor of Arts in Bible and Pastoral Ministry. Then he went over to Vanderbilt University and got a Master of Divinity degree. And if that wasn't enough, he went to Yale University and got a Doctor of Ministry degree. Now, once he also served as a professor in Des Moines Area Community College. He has served church congregations in Alabama, Tennessee, Iowa, Connecticut. He's presently the senior pastor at East End Baptist Tabernacle Church in Bridgeport, Connecticut. And I'm so excited about this because he's serving his 6th term. That means he keeps winning. He's doing something right. Okay. And it might have something to do with some of the stuff that he is co-sponsoring. He is co-sponsoring legislation that's concerning veterans issues. You know how we always want people to think about and don't forget about our veterans. Well, he's absolutely doing that. School bullying, education, public health, human services, and prison reform. He is co-sponsoring all of that type of legislation. He has been selected several times for Connecticut's 100 most influential African Americans. And I can see why, because I'm still talking about all the wonderful things he's done. Losing my breath. But you've done so much. He's the author of Before You Give Up, Consider These Things. Welcome to our hometown hero, Dr. Charlie Stallworth. Reverend Dr. Charlie Stallworth. Welcome to the Ella Johnson Show.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your generosity and your kindness. And I salute you for having this platform and for putting this word out, to put a word out of justice and to make the world a better place. I salute you and know that I'm the little boy from Beatrice, Alabama. I'm on your show.
Well, thank you so much. You know what? We all work together. I've always believed that, and that's how it is. And you didn't hesitate when I asked you to come onto the show. And so I'm very excited about that. But the video that I just showed, I know that, with the police and that story, I know it was kind of old, but you made a reference to one of my favorite quotes, Dr. Martin Luther King. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. How much does that mean to you when you hear that again? Do you still, what does that resonate with you?
Often we used to think more so that at some time, if you could just live out in the suburbs, or if you could just not have your family have an impact of violence, you thought you were okay. But Dr. King wanted to suggest to us is that evil and injustice does not abide by boundaries. And so maybe the injustice is in my corner today, and you try to say, okay, that's over there, that's not part of me. But guess what? Keep living. You're going to look up, and the same injustice that I endure, you will also endure that same injustice. So once we make it a threat at any place, we make it a threat everywhere.
I love it. I love it. Now, 6 terms, Pastor. Talk to me a little bit, because I think this is so important, because a lot of people are down on themselves about someone said I could do this, I couldn't do it, I never amount to anything. You heard those same things at your school. Talk to us a little bit about that.
I remember it was so amazing. I remember my school counselor, and many people can do a little research and recall those persons by name. So I want to be gentle, but when I went to my high school counselor to say, hey, I would like to go to college too. And I don't know if you remember in Beatrice, that was like a pole mill, we used to call it, where they would treat those electrical poles. And I remember she said to me, when I said to her, hey, I'd like to go to college too, she said, you're not college material. The best you can do is go down to that pole mill and get a job. And
Wow.
yes, that's what she said. The best you can do is go down to that pole mill and get a job. And I had seen what that pole mill had done to people, so I did not have an interest of going down. But by the mercies of God and just good people. Now I have to say, looking at my grades, she probably had good evidence to base it.
Did you have poor grades?
Oh, poor grades. I didn't come up to the level of poor grades. I was not one of the fighter students. But I think the reality of it is that you can never look at a person's present condition.
That's right.
Future judgment.
That's right.
That child who maybe the child learns in a different way, or the child
Right.
comprehend. A child does not have a good home place of peace and tranquility. So it's more of who's willing to invest in someone who maybe does not look the part at this moment. And of course, I wanted to go to college, and so I had to apply, get financial aid, and all that stuff alone without any help.
Wow. Now, let me ask you a question, because I think this is very key. At what point, though, there had to come a point where you were like, okay, at 16, you did your first sermon.
Yes.
Now, most of us at 16, I just love when I bring pastors on, because I just feel so free to just be honest.
Yeah.
I was clubbing around that time.
Yeah.
But you were preparing for your first sermon. How did that come about?
Well, I tell people I started at 16, and I was a real 16-year-old. I was not one that just dropped out from the heavens. I was a real 16-year-old trying to find some footing, some foundation. And though I was, it was unreal, because immediately I lost my life and chance to be a youth. That was taken from me by being 16, because I immediately went from, hey, I want to go to the ball game on Friday night and, do what we do.
Yeah.
So I got to be ready for church come Sunday morning. And, but I was 16 and made 16-year-old mistakes. But thank God for the grace of God and the goodness of people who gave me encouragement and who pushed me along, even when some of those sermons probably should not have been preached in anybody's church. Yet they gave me encouragement and told me to keep trying.
That's right. But what was it how did you know that you were supposed to preach at 16?
It was so ironic. I did not see any flashing lights. I did not hear some deep baritone voice of God saying, go tell Pharaoh and let my people go. The only thing I had is the thing I continue to have today. And that is a drive, a burning, a yearning to preach the gospel. It is just something that's in me, and that has abided from me in that time in 1980, over 40 years now. In 1980, that sense of fire that was in me. I prayed, God, I want to, because I grew up in the South, right? And we have all of these wonderful religious testimonies, whether they're true or not. It's just good to tell them. And people talk about, how I had heard pastors talk about they were driving and God turned the car around, or they were out in the field and the day turned dark, And so I wanted some of that, but it didn't happen. And thank God, I probably still would be searching for those kinds of, affirmation. But for me, it was just a desire. My mother, you probably, I don't know if you remember or not, but she was a hairdresser, and she had a stool that she would sit on because she was up in age, and she would sit on that stool to do people's hair. And when she would go to bed, I would take that stool, put it on the coffee table, get me a Bible, and preach in the room with no one in the room. I just didn't room alone.
Oh, wow. That had to be awesome. Now, as a pastor, and then you're African American, Did you have any of these racist challenges that came your way, and how did you handle it?
Oh, absolutely. I was actually home in Beatrice this past week. I was down for just a couple
Right.
in it right out, and I went by a store in what would be the town of Beatrice. The store has been closed for a long time, and uh, Mr. Lindsay Finkler, I can call his name. The truth is light on the store there, and I remember calling his store, asking him the price for a deck of cards. And he said, "But if you want them, come and get them." And I go, "I'd like to know the price before I get there." And he said, "Okay." And he put the phone down. And I guess someone asked him who was on the phone, and he said some, and used the N word. Some in wants to know the price of a deck of cards.
Wait a minute, was that this past weekend?
No. That was
Okay.
way back when. That was like my first experience growing up.
Oh, okay.
And then that was the bus that went from Beatrice to Monroeville that had white kids, because it was at that time. I'm sure they have made significant strides, and I give them encouragement today. But that day it was Monroe Christian Academy, and for all of those white private schools during that time in the 60s and 70s, Christian meant for them blacks not allowed. I hope it's different from today, but that's what they meant then. And those kids would pass by on the bus, they would throw paper, they would spit out the window, and they would just say things. And often I would go home and say to my mother, someone called me the N word or something from that bus, and she would say, "So what is your name?" And I would say, "Charlie." And she said, "So they're not talking to you."
I like that.
So,
I like that.
And then you get into some academic circles, growing up, going to school, Salem University, an all-black school. So you get that all-black school, and you kind of gel together. But once you leave and go to a Vanderbilt, at least 30 years ago, I give them some room. I'm sure some things have changed, but 30 years ago, when the professor only called on you if it has something to do with the black church, that you were only know something that related to you. You were not expected to know about some of the white theologians or church history or any of that. So you saw shades of racism in it. And, it even got to a point where regardless of what you turned in, you couldn't write well enough. You were not thinking it through profoundly enough. Those things just happened.
Wow. Now, is that what helped you decide that you needed to be in politics? I'm sure that had to drive you in some kind of way.
Actually, my father, Mr. Ezra Cunningham, H.B. Williams, I could just go down the line.
Oh, yeah.
They would, Robert Pridge, all of them, they would have these little meetings. And my father would often, let me go with them. They have a little gas burning heater in somebody's side room or something where they had all these meetings about voter registration. Reverend R.B. McIntosh, okay, who's going to run for the Board of Education? And they would always say the only way to make a difference is to get in office and do something. And that was just a birth in me as a child to do, to work hard and to just get in office, to make an impact on people. And that's the thing for me. I just want to be a benefit to help people.
I like that because, you're a pastor and a politician. Now, do you see that the lines cross sometimes, or does it come natural for you to just do the right thing no matter what platform you're on?
Well, that's a good point. Here's what I tell people, and often people say you can't be in religion and politics. And my response is always the same. You should have thought about that before you put my people on the boat and brought them across the water. Because when you put them on the boat and brought them across the water, you forced us to engage in the political process. So I don't have a sense of salvation that I serve God and I get a salvation just to go to heaven. I have a holistic aspect of salvation. So God is concerned about the total being, not just the fact that I pray, but that I'm able to get a job. Not the fact that I can just worship in church, but I can go to any school my grace can get me into. Not that I can just be in my own clique, but that I can have health care like everybody else. And some of those things are decided in political arenas. As we'll talk about later, who's going to be the judge? Who's going to be the prosecuting attorney? Politics has a big impact on those. And so we can become loud, what I want to call a loud silence, go in our church and yell and shout a lot, and yet come out and have no influence in City Hall, no influence in local government, no influence in state or federal government. and we're just, still crying about going to heaven where we all got shoes, and one day we just gonna shout all around God's heaven.
Well, I'm so glad you brought that up, because I asked the question on this show, on this broadcast one time about, why is it that we feel that we cannot stand up for our rights? And I want you to speak on this, because as a minister, knowing the word, and you can apply the word to this, how do we stand up for what's right, standing on the word of God, but still going towards justice? We're seeking justice, but we don't want to compromise our Christian and our Christian beliefs or our faith. How can people do both? Because I think that there's some hesitance on people's parts when they want to stand up for what's right and say, well, God says, let me just forgive them. God says, let me turn the other cheek. And I think there's some confusion. And I just want you to just bring the cobwebs and just clear them out for us tonight on that issue.
We have created categories of sin, and we've created in such a way that we make drinking, smoking, cursing, other things sins. They're like, oh, these are going to get you. But when you read the Bible, and especially the Hebrew Bible, Old Testament, the issue of justice comes up. God identifies with the Israelites because they were slaves in Egypt. God does not Pharaoh, but the very start of the Bible, Genesis, Exodus. Wow, Genesis, how we got here. Exodus, how we got into oppression. Moses, go tell Pharaoh, let my people go. That's liberation that runs throughout the Bible. Jesus, who's talking about the Spirit of the Lord upon me to preach the gospel. And he talks about to the oppressed. And so bona fide religion is not just a religion that deals in, these religious acts, but it's a religion that will free people, that will liberate people. So if you just want to get me a seat on the bus to go to heaven, excuse my language, but I ain't going, okay? I need a seat on the bus that's going to help me live while I'm here, because when death happens, death is going to take care of itself.
See, you're about to make me shout up in here tonight, because that's what I said. I said, I don't see how it is, because we're going to get into the Ronda Morrison, Johnny D situation, because that's a sticky subject. It's a sticky situation, and it's one of those topics that we don't want to address, but we need to, because moving forward, if we're ever going to be liberated as they were during Hebrews, we need to be able to address this without always feeling like, somebody's going to get me if I say this. The Christians are not. Because when we think about Dr. Martin Luther King, he was like you, an activist and a minister. And he didn't cross the lines. And I don't think that they had an issue with a minister on the pulpit talking about justice, because he was also talking about love. He was also talking about, forgiving. So he was still mixing it, but he was saying, we're still going to get out here and march. Right. We're still going to get out here and fight. Otherwise, we'd still be drinking from colored only water fountains right now.
And it's amazing how the other side knows how to switch the story. I don't have it with me tonight, but hopefully I can come back at some time. You permit me to come back.
Of course.
I did a list of the number of white congresspersons, senators, and a couple of presidents who were actually preachers, but they were from the other race. But yet, when we start talking as preachers, then all of a sudden it's a separation of church and state. Well, excuse me, I read a little history too. And the separation of church and state has nothing to do to keep the church out of politics. It was to protect politics from the Church of England. And so our whole ethos of who we are is built in a God of protest, of freedom for people. And for I keep using the term because I'm just sold on the idea of liberation for people.
I like it. I love it. I love it. Now let's talk a little bit about today. Today we're watching, the world is watching how America and the judicial system is going to respond to this Chauvin trial. Chauvin, whatever his name is. Where do you sit with that? Because, it's a thing we're watching, and we have to eventually address this stuff, because if we don't, we're just going to get left behind in this liberation phase. Right. So where do you, because it's going to go one of two ways. We're going to get justice. He's going to be found guilty, and we'll move on. I'm not sure if that's going to be the whole thing that we need, the entire thing that we need for Blacks to finally start getting justice. It's a step, though. But if we don't get justice in this situation, there could be an uproar. Now, as a minister, and you're talking to your congregation, what would you say to them when that verdict comes in and it's not in our favor?
Well, I say, we need to take a few moments, some time to grieve. Let us not act like this does not hurt. Let us not act like it is not painful. Let us not act like we just gonna throw our hands up and thank God and just praise God anyhow. No, take a moment to bleed and to grieve. And then let's take another moment to register to vote. Let's take
Nice.
a moment to show up to vote. Let's take some moments to get people in place to run for political office. Let's prepare to change the system. Power is not going to concede automatically and just freely, but we have to change the system. And we can tell from this last presidential election that votes do count. And we just have to engage full force because all of us, those who are looking at this, we have seen it so many times. The first person that I'm aware of who was shot in my lifetime, who was shot by a white police officer, happened in Beatrice when I was a kid in the 70s. And nothing happened to that police officer. A pat on the back. And so the fact now that we have cameras on our cell phones, the world is waking up. But guess what? This didn't start yesterday. This has been a long time. So we just sit around any longer and ask people, to pray one more prayer, march one more march. I'm not against that, but we got to register to vote. We have to show up to vote. We have to fight the powers that be head on, and we have to fight in such a way that people feel it. People know, politicians know that African Americans in general are a forgiving people. You can do some major things to us and you will get forgiven. But we have to say, I'll forgive you, but that I don't excuse your action, and you're not prepared any longer to represent me in a particular phase. A lot of judges are elected. A lot of attorneys in different capacities are elected. Let's make sure that we fight and not just get upset, not just burn down the city or get upset, but have an impact. One of my friends said to me, he invited me to like a rally, to protest a rally. And I said to him, I'm not going. And he said, well, don't you think you should have to tell your people not to burn down the city? I said, when you start telling your people not to burn down the people, then I can tell my people not to burn down the city.
Yeah, I have never heard a pastor take that approach on that, because most people would not have anything to do with it. But at least you gave a good explanation. And I think that's good, because people are starting to treat us like we started the violence. We didn't start this,
Exactly.
We didn't start it.
And, I believe it was Dr. King who often talked about riot. It's almost like the voice of, protest. It's almost like the voice of people who can't be heard any other way. And they're trying to speak in a loud language that often we are not getting.
Well, I want you to talk to the pastors, because you have a different type of language. See, me, I talk, in a different way, and it might not be received. But you, being a pastor on the pulpit, studied the same thing, read the same Bible. What do you say to those ministers that says, Ella, you know what? Let it go. Let it go. Don't open up wounds, because now we're going to get into the Ronda Morrison and the reopening of this investigation. What would you say to those ministers? Because honestly, just being 100, I reached out to certain ministers in the Monroe community, because I just took a page out of the history that's just how they did it. The church was always the first place to start. So I thought I could do that, but these are different times, Pastor. And no one wants to get involved, because it's like, you know what? Forgive. What do you say to those ministers? Because I already know where I'm coming from. I'm not stopping. But what do you say to those ministers that say, no, we're not going to get involved with this? What do you say to that?
Yeah, well, a couple of things, and I have dear friends, colleagues who are still in Monroe County, still in Alabama. I would say a couple of things, and the first thing I would say, what is it that you want me to let go? You define for me what you're telling me not to do, so I will know what you're asking me. Because when you just tell me let it go, I have no idea what you're talking about. So why don't you open up? Are you telling me to let go that your cousin who has a job works for somebody you don't want to offend? Or are you telling me to let go because you get some social funding for a particular program in your church, come on, let's talk and tell me what you're telling me to let go of, because it can't be you're telling me to let go of justice. It can't be that. So it has to be something else. I'd appreciate you more if you're just honest and say, I'm scared, I'm afraid. I can deal with that. But just don't tell me to forgive and let go. I have forgiven, okay? But forgiveness does not make protest obsolete, does not make justice obsolete. But I would also keep in mind that, something that the Black church brags about today that the Black church probably should not be bragging about. We all have King celebrations now, Dr. King celebration. We learn it, we sing, we shall overcome. We sing, I have a dream. But the majority of Black churches were not in support of the movement. And I think
Come on now.
get that the majority of the churches the majority of the pastors were not in support of the movement. Dr. King was kicked out of the National Baptist Convention. That's our major denominational body. He was kicked out. The guy who was the former president, a president while Dr. King was alive, changed the entrance to his church when the city named a street that his church was located on after Dr. King. So now we see where you can be telling me to let go of justice.
Wow. Now that is a very interesting thing because, we do pretend like the church has always been a part of everything, but it seems like, Pastor, and I mean, you correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like our greatest opposition when we're trying to do stuff is ourselves.
Yes. Yeah, and you're well equipped. You don't need any help from me. You're well equipped to handle this topic. That's why God has you doing this. But yeah, because it is in our society where, let's say I'm going to create something. We'll have a community group for voter registration. And for some reason, all of a sudden, the person we elect president gets a good job working with the city. Is that not amazing? Gets a good job working with the city. So now we're compromised. And so when Pastor Stallworth has a complaint now, Pastor Stallworth goes to see person who's in power. Person in power doesn't really talk to me, but talk to the person they just made vice president of maintenance, and have that person come talk to me and try to make a deal with me. It is just it's a sad commentary, and unfortunately, people are trying to think in such political terms that we fail to be that voice for the people.
Wow. I want everybody to know that's watching this broadcast that when I first went to Pastor Charlie Stallworth, I've always respected you. I've always followed you. And I appreciate you. And I want to say publicly, I appreciate you for supporting Women at Work International when we fed families for Thanksgiving. But when I went to you, you said something very profound. You said to me, Ella, I read your petition, but I think it's watered down. Yeah. And I thought that was a little rough. I was like, ooh, Jesus, protect me, Lord. But you were like, no, Ella, push more, because you said they need to be held accountable. Yeah. So we're going to get to that. But let's start back November 1st, 1986, because tonight's broadcast is about the petition and about letting people see that it's okay to support this because it helps the entire community. Yeah. Because a wrong was done to Johnny D. Now, November 1st, 1986, 18-year-old white girl at the cleaners was killed. There's rumors, she was raped and killed, and da-da-da-da-da. Where were you when you heard about this?
I had just left Alabama, I believe I had just left maybe a year, because I remember the story. But I think probably it was either the year I left or I left before the process was over.
So what did you think when you first heard it?
Well, at that moment, I really didn't know, because my interest at that time, I was trying to get out of Alabama. But I was fully aware, because of my father's involvement, that any person of our hue who was going to be accused of killing a white person in Alabama at this time of our lives will not get a fair trial.
Are we far from that?
No. We are not far from that.
I'm so glad that you admitted that, because most people wouldn't have admitted that. No, we've made progress, We're watching a trial every day of a man who was killed in broad daylight by a police officer, people who are supposed to protect us. And instead of having the officer on trial, they're putting him on trial, And I think that is just unbelievable. And I just don't know if if they were getting away with it when there weren't cameras.
Right.
We have cameras now,
Right.
several of them, but we can count more of them that got away with it.
Yes.
Now, what else can we do? Because marching isn't doing it, obviously. Protesting isn't doing it. What's the next step? To go out here and just start killing people? I don't think that's the answer, but,
Right.
It's
this thing called this federal law that has been passed down with this thing of immunity, where an officer or a person of the court is protected. In Connecticut, in our last session, we challenged that. And we changed the law as much as we could to say, if you're a police officer and you go out here and unfairly kill somebody, you are going to be held accountable. The city is not going to cover for you. The city is not going to pay for your attorney. No, you are going to have to be accountable for it. So don't think because you made the best judgment, quote unquote, under your policy and procedure, now you get off. No, you do not get off. And so we have to challenge those because what I was pressing you on, the persons who helped to promote those injustices should be held accountable.
right.
But they are protected under some immunity clause. So we have to make sure, that's why I said boldness is so important. We have to make sure that you can no longer be protected. The officers can no longer be protected because an officer knows if he or she goes out, kills somebody, even if that officer is found guilty, most times that officer will not receive prison time, will not receive jail time, and will go to the next city and get a job as a police officer. Yeah. And so we have to make sure that we pass laws in as many states, like in Connecticut right now. You can't go to the next town and get a job. We wipe that out. That will not happen. And we no longer buy the clause like we got some bad apples. I think it was the comedian, I forget his name, who has the best powerful truth in the form of a joke, who said in some professions we can't have bad apples. American Airlines can't say, we just got a few bad pilots who like crashing planes. In some professions,
right,
can't have bad apples. So
right.
We have to make sure we hold people accountable. If the sheriff is going to hide information, you're going to get false witnesses. I'm sorry, you're not going home and live off your retirement check and have a good time while somebody else's life has been destroyed.
So you were part of that legislation to change that law and put that in effect?
Yes.
Wow. So that's it could be as easy as rallying with other lawmakers to bring that type of thing into Alabama.
Right.
So that this type of Johnny D thing would never happen again. Because you're right. Brian Stevenson and his organization did go after these officers that did this, that coerced against Johnny D, and they were protected for the immunity laws.
Yeah.
Like you said. And so let me ask you a question. The petition. The petition is to reopen the murder case of Ronda Morrison. She was killed. Johnny D was sent to death row, sent directly to death row. Now, there's some things that I pulled up. You and I kind of were looking over today, but I want to bring some of this up so that I want to share some of the excerpts that I found in the book to be good key pointers. And we're going to kind of go over them. Because I really want you guys to come into the fold of knowing exactly some of the things that's in the book, because it's going to make you think. We're so quick to want to apply God to things. Well, let me show you guys something in the book where that was brought up. That's the wrong slide. This is it. Okay, I want you guys to pay attention here. This is straight from the book. Before filling out the report, the Morrisons had asked their minister at Eastwood Baptist Church what they should do. And he had told them that God required them to forgive Johnny D and pray for him. God also required them to demand Johnny D's execution, the pastor said. God expects justice, and that includes punishment. If the Morrisons asked the court to show Johnny D mercy, they would be denigrating the sanctity of life and committing a sin. With that advice in mind, the Morrisons had written in the report, "This man took our daughter's life and should pay with his own." Now, we're so quick to apply God to everything. and say, forgive, let it go. This pastor gave advice. No, you can forgive him, but you still push for his execution. Now, Johnny D wasn't even guilty. But what do you say? Because I want to attack this religion phase, because we got to get past this, or we're never going to be active and proactive in making things better for us if we keep applying this biblical thing when it's really just fear. Tell me to trust God. No, you're really afraid. I'm not afraid. So let me go.
Right.
Send me, I'll go, because I'm not afraid, because I know who I am and whose I am. So on one level, we want to talk about who we are and whose we are. But when it comes for justice, we want to compromise and say, well, forgive. And like, we might not get it here, Ella. We might get ours on the other side. I don't want mine on the other side. So if I'm not going to get it until I get to the other side, Pastor, then why am I trying to do the right thing here? I want my mansion here, right? So address what we just saw in the book.
Well, you know, I have this thing since I've been in politics. I don't question a person's motives, but I do question their actions. And what this pastor did was blasphemy. And that's simply what is blasphemy from first base to third. Because you're carrying the Bible and you're wearing a clergy collar does not mean you're not a racist. We know that racism was able to survive in many white churches because many white pastors did not have the boldness to stand up and speak a gospel. So any pastor who's going to promote that, I question their actions, and I label it as racism. That is what that is, cut and dry racism.
Right. I'm glad you said that, because, you know, in this situation with Johnny D, you know, we go back and forth with what happened to him, and we say, well, listen, Ella, you know, he got his justice. You know, they paid whatever. I don't know the details of that, and that's not important, because at this point, Pastor, no one has paid for what has happened to Johnny D. No one has paid for what has happened to Ronda. So do you think that this is really a good opportunity for both communities? And how awesome an example that would be if we all come together, because the Caucasians have jumped on. I mean, next week we're interviewing Pete Early, who wrote the book Circumstantial Evidence, because he has been doing a lot of things behind the scenes to bring this and reopen it as well. So when I reached out to him and we teamed up, I said, wow, what this could be a good representation. And we're talking about the church. This is exactly what he died for, because none of us are perfect. So talk to me about that.
Yes, great question. You know, you have two families, two lives, two families destroyed.
Right.
People want to deal with some compensation. How much does a day cost? And what is the price on a life with spent time, solitary confinement, death row? What's the emotional impact of that? And how much do you want so you can really give me an amount of money and that makes it okay? I don't think so. It's like what church people do when they talk about Job. You know, God gave him twice as much at the end. Okay, so let me get this. God kills my children, give me some more, and I'm supposed to be happy. No, I don't. It doesn't work.
And see, that's keeping it real, and that's what I'm talking about.
It doesn't work like that. I'm sorry, no, it doesn't work like that. And so the necessity of getting this petition going and signing the petition is that we're making the future better. We're making sure if this or when this happens again, we have another set of circumstances in place, that those who are serving in law enforcement will have a better way of knowing how to go about this. Those in the community will have a better way of going about it. And the way to fix something is not just to leave it open and throw it under the bed, but to bring it out. We don't know whether the person who did the crime is dead or alive or what, we don't know. But it is the call of justice to make sure we follow through with the process.
Now, do you believe, since we're talking about that, the civil rights movement, I'm sure you're familiar with a lot of that, because I can tell that you really follow Dr. King. When did it really gain its legs, the civil rights movement, do you think? What was that turning point? Because we're not there, we're still not there yet, but what was the turning point? Because maybe we have to go back and take a lesson from what they did.
Yeah, I think the turning point is, for this time, is for you actually doing what you were doing, and I'll tell you why. So when I was at Vandy, I took a class, actually a guy whose father grew up in Camden, Alabama, Dr. Lewis Baldwin. His son was a PhD church history professor at Vanderbilt, and he was a King Scholar. So I took a class on the teachings of Dr. King from him, as well as one of my mentors was a dear friend of Dr. King. But they would both tell you a major part of the turn of the civil rights movement that kicked it up was when they arrested Rosa Parks. It's like the man who was driving that bus should have gone on lunch break because he doesn't know. He gave a movement legs. He gave a movement fire. Why? Because you had someone who was not a troublemaker. She went to work. She did her job. She was just what we would call the Ella of her day. And when she said, no, I'm just not moving today. Enough is enough. She got arrested. Went around town. Even the white people were saying they arrested Rosa Parks. Little bun on the back of her head, some low shoes, the long dress down by your ankles. Just they arrested Rosa Parks. Really? What? And so it takes, and here's why I mentioned you and others. It takes those that people are saying, wait, if they do this to that person, you know what they do to me? Exactly. And so that was one of the major turning points in the civil rights movement. And around that same time, Kings at Dexter, they need somebody that they could, help lead the movement. But a major turning point was an African American woman who decided, no, today I'm not just going to go with the status quo.
But I think about Johnny D. Johnny D didn't really have a criminal background either. And I think his fault, if you will, was the fact that he liked women of a different race. Okay. And he was judged for that. But I mean, we may have moved from that, but we haven't moved toward this mindset. The mindset is still there in Monroe, where it's you guys, us. We have to find a way to break that energy. We have to find a way. And like you said, walking away and just saying, let God handle it. That's definitely not the way. Yeah. Because I think God expects us. Because think about it. When Jesus died on the cross, he died for all of us.
Right.
He did not die so that some people could have and some people cannot. And I think that sometimes we allow things to happen and we accept it. And now you're convincing other people to accept it. Right. And that's why it's very difficult and confusing and contradictory when the church on one hand says you are the head and not the tail. But then you tell me, well, sometimes you might just have to be the tail, Ella. Well, now, which one is it? Come on now. Which one is it? Am I the head or the tail? I am the head. Right. Never again beneath. So if you're telling me, and then God says, greater works than these. Why don't we remember all of that when we are making a decision for the community? Because you got these pastors that speak for the whole church, and they just sit there and say, well, the pastor said we ain't going to go down there to that rally, but we ain't going to go, Ella. What? Please help me understand.
Right. As you mentioned, if having a courtship with a white woman was his crime that deserved a death row, most of us will not make it past tomorrow. Let me just say that for the record. And, one thing that other society does, and we buy into it, that we make the victim a bad person, that we accuse. I mean, the guy today, the trial that's going on today, they won't know, the Floyd had drugs on him. So what? Do you kill him because he had drugs on him?
Exactly.
We allow other people to make a person who was mistreated like something that person was flawed. So that's how this person received that penalty. But let's be for real. We've had people killed in our community who was just a little kid out playing on the playground, or a kid walking home with a bag of Skittles.
Play gun.
Yeah. So
whistled at a white woman.
Right.
And
if they want to play the card that he was going with someone of the opposite race, well, you know how many of our grandmothers and mothers got raped by white?
Absolutely.
By white men. So if whoever does that, I would I would call him out and say, get a life. Yeah. Get a life.
Why did you leave Alabama? Alabama needs you. I mean, I'm just gonna, it's the elephant in the room. I have to say it.
Yeah, I think I'm sure about time. And one thing, church people make the mistake of, you know, they have so they have so they have such a clean, sterile, sanctified Jesus, one that's just you know, blonde hair and blue eyes, which he was not, but
No.
they just made him so removed and holy. He got electrocuted. He got the electric chair. He got the death penalty. Why? He hung out with people known as the Amharasi, the people of the land. Jesus is the one who hangs at the, and I know some of the theologians are going to challenge me on this, but I'm ready for the challenge. But Jesus is the one who hangs around at the front door of the club, looking at the guys who've been shooting crap, looking at the guys shooting crap and saying, you know what, dudes, you know, it's rough. Life is rough, isn't it? Yeah. Okay. We're going to find a way to make this thing work better. Let's go down and see if we can't challenge the government. That's the kind of Jesus, not the one that shows up in church with a nice Hickey Freeman suit on, crosses his legs on the front row and sings, you know, a great hymn on Sunday morning. That's the Jesus we have made. That is not the Jesus of the Bible. Jesus of the Bible challenges Pharisees and Sadducees, turns over tables, tell a woman who's caught in an act of adultery, girl, get on out of here. I mean, that's the kind of Jesus, that's the Jesus of the Bible who makes good wine. That's the Jesus of the Bible.
Jesus, my Jesus said, keep the party going. That's what my Jesus did.
You know, we ain't going home yet. No.
Keep the party going. But you know what? That's why I can identify him, because he's real. And people who are not being taught, that's why there's nothing that compares to having a personal relationship, because then nobody can just come and tell you. I love how you think it's good to hold people accountable, because I think we should hold our churches and our pastors and our leaders accountable. You know, in Monroeville, I think there's been this thing, and I want to go back to that, because that's where we're from and that's what we're trying to help, because I want people to take a look at what's going on with Chauvin, the George Floyd, because my friend Kim just said that this is a movement. And I really do believe and agree with that, because look at how many people are talking about it.
Right.
This happened last year and we're still talking about this, because America has an opportunity to prove what it really is all about. And I'm already seeing some things I don't like. You know, just the commentary, because I like to go and watch it on Fox.
Yeah,
you know, because I watch it on Fox because, and I'm just gonna be honest, Pastor, sometimes I might say some things I shouldn't. Yeah. I just feel like confessing to you.
That's a Jesus moment. That's a Jesus moment.
But it's because I'm angry, Pastor. I'm gonna be honest. I can't look at it the same. And I think what frustrates me more is how our community can't stick together. Right. And I'm like, what? I question myself sometimes, like, okay, Ella, well, and you have just really encouraged me today, because I have got opposition from this petition, but I can't listen to that, because I listen only to God. And sometimes this road can be lonely. I'm sure you know that, right, when you're trying to just do the right thing, because I can't sit here and pray to a God that wants me to settle for less. Right. I just can't. It's hard for me to serve him. And I'm like, well, why is it that I have to accept? And I think we just have to get that part. And that seems like it's something we should have gotten a long time ago when he died on the cross, but we missed something. And now we're convincing other people, you know, don't get involved with this other thing. I've even had, I'm going to be honest with you, when I did a peaceful protest in Alabama, because there were people that were being murdered and the police were not really investigating, and they were just dying, and it was nothing. So I got involved, wanted to do a peaceful protest in Monroeville at the square. I cannot begin to tell you the opposition that came from that. Mm-hmm. Now, I wasn't going to stop. You know, I had to keep doing it. I have faith, I trust God, and I believe God. But the part that hurt the most was when I was told that a Black minister went to the courthouse and said, we're not going to be 1,000 feet at that rally. And I said, well, I don't understand. And now when you talk about Dr. King, it makes sense. He didn't even have the support of the church. And I actually talked to someone, Pastor, from Mobile. I don't want to call his name because he may not want me to mention that. But I spoke to him, and he said that when Dr. King wanted to come through Mobile, you know, and say, hey, look, can we be of service? And they turned him away Black ministers. I don't get that. And I heard the same thing happen in Monroe too, but we're not going to go there. But what? Why? What? Help us understand that.
Some things I don't know if we will ever
Understand it, right?
I just know the reality, and that's why I want to give you as much motivation and encouragement as I can, because you're doing a great work and you should keep it going. But we often have what I call them happy scriptures or happy statements. And sometimes when we're having a meeting with our community, you would have someone to get up and say, you know what we need to do? We just all need to get together. That's what we need to do. We just all need to get together. But I wish in that same meeting, someone would stand up and say, BS. We're going to take the folk who are going, and we are going.
That's right.
You're not going. We're not going to sit around here and wait for all of us to get together. Because
that's me.
I'm not going to ever get
yes.
Not a monolithic people. We don't all think the same. We don't all live the same places. We don't all believe the same thing. No, we are going to fight this battle. Those who are going with us are going with us. Those who are not going with us are not going with us. There's an account with Jesus in Scripture in which a lot of people quit following Jesus. Jesus doesn't say go after them. Jesus asked his disciples, "Do y'all want to hang around too, or y'all want to go? If you want to go," and so
see, that's what I like about Jesus. Yeah. He wasn't this like, no, well, if you don't want to go. Yeah, I'm not gonna beg you to stay. Go. I don't need you. You know, if you want to go. I want you to address this. Curtis Gisson III says it's a mental mindset in Monroe. While working for a law enforcement agency here, I was told by a black high up supervisor, you won't be able to do what these white boys do. Ooh.
Yeah.
Is that where we are?
That is so true. That's spoken like a prophet. The other side of that is that we cannot use that to say, okay, that we're not going to fight. It's reality. We can do the same things. White guy, I was working with some kids in my city of Bridgeport, and I just kept trying to emphasize with them, if you go out to the club tonight, there's a fight between you, white guy's going home. They're going to call his or her parents. That person's going home. You are going to jail. So as much as you can, keep yourself out of that situation. But that does not alleviate the fact that we have to fight for those who, for whatever reason, ended up as part of the system.
Now, what about these blacks that get in these positions and city council representatives and, what have you, and they just want to go along to get along? We have some of those representatives too.
Politics is a strange thing. And what someone told me earlier, just remember elections keep coming up. So whether it's 2 years or 4 years, this election is not the only election. And I would say have a conversation with your politicians, the person who represents you, and just be honest. I have very honest constituents who, they've been calling me this week to say what their beliefs are. And just be honest. And when the next election comes around, because elections keep coming, don't just say, oh, okay, yeah, well, you probably couldn't do anything. No, I want to know what you did and what was the
result. Exactly. Don't just keep electing the same people over and over. What do you think about the fact that Tom Tate was elected year after year in Monroe? For 30 years, I think it was. Yeah. He was elected.
I met him the first year he ran. I remember I was at a friend's house in Monroe while he was coming around shaking hands. The account that we have, he should be held accountable. He should not just retire now and live a life of ease. And no, he should be held accountable. He should wake up every morning knowing, oops, I may go to prison myself. He needs to live with that reality.
And how do we get around the immunity laws, though, Pastor?
You have to fight them state by state. It's more challenging for a state like Alabama that has a state house that's controlled by Republicans. It's kind of hard to do. But every place that we can, we have to keep fighting. And we have to make sure that we have a police department that's reflective of the city. If the city is 60% African American, the police department ought to be 60% African American. If you have a person who's already afraid of me before they even show up at my house, who already thinks I'm a monster, do you think they're not going to show up when I may have had too many drinks tonight and all of a sudden they're going to treat me a way that as an equal? No, This person was afraid of me when this person got dressed that morning to come to work. So we have to make sure that we have a police department that represents the community that they serve.
Very good point. Now, let me ask you a question since we're on the petition, because I know someone asked me this question. When you have a petition like this and we're trying to reopen an investigation, who ultimately makes that decision? Because I know that we have the recipient that I named on this petition is the Attorney General of Alabama, Steve Marshall. But what happens after we get those 1,000 signatures? What's the next step?
Well, I think some conversation probably needs to be presented to your governor, and just to let your governor know, along with the Attorney General, how many signatures you have, and that you're not just going to go away. So, Governor, Attorney General, you have to do something, even if that's saying you're not going to do anything, but you have to do something. And we are not going to go away. Many times, the broader community knows we're only going to protest for about 30 days. After 30 days are over, we're going back home. And so if they can just bear up for 30 days, this is going to be over and we're going back home. But if we can say, you know what, 30 days over, we're going to take a break. But on day 32, we'll be back.
Well, I definitely have that kind of tenacity because I'm not easily moved by opinions. And because this is something that I've had to pray about and ask God for guidance on, and it's burning. And I'll be honest with you, Pastor, I can't get Johnny D out of my I keep seeing him. I keep seeing that video. I said, tomorrow it could be someone else.
Yeah.
And if we don't do something about this, there will be someone else.
Well,
and
go ahead. I don't mean to cut you off.
No, go ahead.
So just some context of me with this story. That's why another reason I'm so delighted to be part of your show tonight. So it's one Sunday a while ago, and I'm just at home saying, okay, I don't know. What can I do? I've watched enough Netflix. I don't want to eat another candy bar. So what should I do? So I came up with, go to the movies. Well, what am I going to see? Well, I'd seen the commercial of this movie, but I had no idea what it was about. No idea. And so I said, okay, I get the late show. It's like 10:30, 11 o'clock. I get the late show. So I go in, Baptist preacher hat, baseball cap, turned around backwards, a big Coke and a big bag of M&Ms. I'm just going to have fun at the movies. I go in the movie, about 5 people in the auditorium, and almost the first line of the movie says, in a small town in Monroeville, Alabama. I go, huh? What? And for the rest of the movie, I go to a movie, I would take at least 2 or 3 bathroom breaks. I did not move. I mean, I wanted to get in my car and drive to Monroe for that night. I did not.
What did it do to you, though? What were you thinking? What were you feeling?
The injustice that happened, the disregard for human life, and the things that they were doing as persons who were supposed to protect us in the criminal justice system itself, prosecuting attorneys and judges. I don't think I finished my soda. I don't think I finished my. It was just
It does something to you. It does. It has to. If it doesn't, there's a problem.
Yeah.
It has to do something.
It was just, my sermon the following Sunday was on much of that movie. It was just because I remember going to that cleaners getting my shirts done. I remember that. I remember you riding about on Highway I-84 and said, well, he lives somewhere around here or somewhere. I remember those things, and it had been so far removed in my mind that when I saw the commercial on television, I did not know that's what it was actually about. And so when I saw it, it was just a burning in my soul. And the sheriff Tate name just kept flashing in my soul. And I'm saying to myself,
I'm telling you,
you need to be held accountable.
I agree. I just wish there was a way around it with these immunity. There has to be a way. I just, but I want to bring up another part. This is another part here. I want you guys to pay attention to this. I'm bringing you guys, if you just tuned in, I'm bringing you clips from the book, excerpts from the book, just Circumstantial Evidence by P. Early. Now, in this first section here, you see where Brian Stevenson and O'Connor went to visit Chapman. This is when Stevenson had now decided to take on Johnny D's case, and he greeted Stevenson and O'Connor. Chapman greeted Stevenson and O'Connor cordially when they arrived at his office. After he closed the door, he told them that he personally had serious doubts about whether Johnny D was guilty. He mentioned that his brother, Terry, was convinced that Johnny D was innocent based on their knowing each other in the woodcutting business. Besides, Chapman said there were things about Meyer's testimony that just didn't add up. Stevenson and O'Connor felt relieved. At last, it looked as if Johnny D was going to get a break. But before either of them could speak, Chapman added that despite his personal feelings, he was obligated as district attorney to defend the integrity of the jury's verdict. Now, talk to me about that. I just when I read that, I said, you know what, this is just absurd. You know that these testimonies, they weren't put on a polygraph. There are too many holes in the story. Then there's later where the young woman, Kelly, the one that Johnny D had the relationship with, later in the book, it talks about how she kind of blurted out that they put her up to testifying against Johnny D. They got her to say he did it. You know, they probably did something to her. I'll keep reading, but they probably did something to her, get her to say it. But this is Chapman. God bless his soul. He's dead now, but he knew that Johnny D was not guilty of this, but he just didn't have the about himself, to the integrity to go and do something about it. We still have people representing our government like this, Pastor. How do we get them out of there?
You know, I keep going back to vote, 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 vote.
True.
And even in those moments when you don't feel like you have enough vote to vote them out, at least run somebody against them. Let them know that they are being challenged and put their record on the table. Because, you know, bottom line, if I get accused of something, I don't have to prove myself innocent. You have to prove me guilty. And so when it flips as if now I have to prove myself, that when you can hear bad testimonies and you say, well, that's okay because he's probably guilty anyway. Well, that means now I got to prove myself. You know, I got to prove myself innocent, which is so unfair. The entire system is unfair, the entire system.
But there are people from Monroe that are watching this broadcast. They hear all this conversation. But somewhere, why are we afraid of losing our jobs? Well, Ella, you know, I understand, I hear you, but the jobs, there's not that many here in Monroeville as it is. So you want me to stand on that courthouse steps with you? You're going to go back to Orlando. I go to work and they give me the pink slip because now they feel like I'm someone that's going to be combative or, you know, this type of thing. How do you deal with a small town like Monroeville and people who want to support, but because they have the reins on them so tight, they don't know where to go?
Right. A very hard call. And, you know, first I want to say I understand their struggle. I understand how much they are putting on the line. I do understand that. But I would also say to them, you're not just fighting for this case, but you're fighting for your children and for your grandchildren and for your great-grandchildren. So what we have to decide, at what point do we want to stand up and make a difference? I think that's the thing we have to decide. And that often calls for great sacrifice. I keep saying to people, Dr. King did not grow old and die. Malcolm X did not grow old and die. Jesus did not grow old and die. Their lives were taken because in some aspect of justice that was at stake. I know there are people probably who know me who hate me with a passion and who.
Why do you feel that way? Why do you think there are people that hate you with a passion?
I am sure when I speak about injustice, whether in the police department or wherever, there are people who are upset. But I'm sorry. I'm not going to go home and stay awake all night having to worry about the fact that you hate me and that if you could take me out, you can take me out. If something happens at one point in time, if that happens, you know what? I gave it my best, and I hope I motivated somebody who's going to be twice as bad to take it up where I drop it. So, you know, we have to ask ourselves, am I going to continue to permit this to happen? So it is not, am I going to lose my influence with someone who maybe will give me a contract, but am I going to lose my soul and the souls of my children and my grandchildren because I will not stand up and make a difference? It has very little to do with the personality. So Johnny D is just a personality. It has to do with justice. And
That's right.
the issue. We got to keep the right issue on the table, because when we start talking about justice, they want to put something else on trial. No, we're not putting something else on trial. We're putting justice on trial. Let's deal with the justice. You can change the name of the individual, but justice should be for all of us.
How do we get the narrative back on focus? Because sometimes we allow, like, let's say, for example, with with Colin Kaepernick, when he knelt, they made it all about the flag and about the military, the veterans and all this stuff. And that was not what it was about. How do we change the narrative back? No, that's not what this is about. This is because it's almost like they figured us out. They know that we're only going to last for so long.
Right.
They know they'll give it a couple of weeks. They won't talk about George Floyd, but George Floyd is a movement, like my friend Kim said, and it has continued. Why? What was the difference with George Floyd as opposed to some of these other things? Why has this one lasted so long?
You know, a friend of mine, Bishop Watts, who's like a mentor to me, who's pastor Shallow Baptist Church in New London, Connecticut, and leads a great seminary program. But he said to me, and the Kaepernick story is the one he was talking about, is that you can't let someone else take your story. If you let someone else and take your story and tell your story, it will no longer be your story. What happened with Kaepernick, they took his story. They took the story of police brutality and wrapped it up in a flag, and that became, if you take a knee, you are not respecting the flag. They took his story. The media, they took his story. With the Floyd incident, the world took its own story back. Unfortunately, it got told through burning buildings and, some other things as well, but it was also demonstrated through protests. And you have white people and black people, male, female, young and old, all coming together to tell the story. No, we are not going to let the media tell this story. We are going to tell this story. And so we have to make sure we keep telling our story. So when we protest, let's say for jobs, and they stand up and say, we gave 10 people jobs. No, thank you for that. But we got 60 people who need jobs. So we're going to keep talking about the 60 people. We have to keep telling our own story, because if they take our story, they will retell it in a way that we won't even recognize it's our story.
Now, I want to ask you this. Do you think, what is the difference between the African Americans and us now, as opposed to the women and men in the 60s? What's the difference? There are definitely some stark differences, but what sticks out to you more than anything? What are the differences? Because they were able to accomplish a lot more than we are. So what did they do differently?
Well, I think things happened on both sides. I think racism was more visible. It became part of the institution. So the target is no longer there. For one, I think for two, the target is no longer there. And I think number two, there are people who are fighting, but they find themselves fighting alone so much they just get tired and they just get exhausted and they just stop fighting. With the target that they had in the civil rights movement, that did not last for 20 decades. It was about time Dr. King got to Memphis. They had begun to, dismantle. The greater power had started to dismantle, the civil rights movement. And so we have to take the people that we have, and it's a far more difficult fight today than it was then, because there are no water fountains. No sheriff is going to publicly just call you the N-word. And so those things are hidden in the institution. And so we have to make sure that those of us who are fighting connect and keep fighting and just don't get weary.
So I want you to look into your camera and speak to the people who are on the fence about the petition. You
Yeah.
know, I want you to, because I say it every week, but there's nothing like hearing it from a reverend doctor, your representative, your state representative. I mean, you've gone through a lot to get to where you are too. I mean, we didn't talk about a lot of that tonight, but you've seen racism. It's been at your front door, because the way you feel and the way you express yourself, you didn't just get that because you woke up. That had to grow in you. I
Right.
know it did. And what do you say to the people who are not there yet, that just say, you know what, I want to follow you guys, but I just can't. I got to think about my family.
And I would say that's exactly what you need to do to think about your family, but what kind of life you want your family to have. Take the personalities and the characters off the table and put the issues on the table. The issue here is the issue of justice. Johnny D is just one of the many Johnny D's that are in the whole world. We have to make sure we're going to fight for justice. I'm going to fight for justice just as hard for a person who I did not know, who may have had some flaws in his or her life, but I'm going to fight for justice for that person, not just for that personality. So I would say, yes, fight for your family. That's what you need to do, but do it on a broader scale, because injustice in my house today would be injustice in your house tomorrow.
I want to address this comment, because there are a lot of people that feel this way. And Curtis, I know very well, because we disagree on a lot of stuff. But thank you for tuning in, Curtis. He says on this post, he said, I disagree about the Kaepernick analogy. As a retired veteran that's buried my father under that flag, with two brothers that would be buried under that flag, a son that would be buried under that flag, I find it disrespectful to protest a symbol that gives you the right to protest.
Okay, and thank you, Curtis, for your remark, but I think the thing that Curtis is missing, he was not protesting the flag. They took his story and retold it. He was protesting police brutality. That's what he was protesting, police brutality on young black, especially black men. But the story got told differently. And so when you said, I just, no, what you are agreeing with is the story they told. Let Kaepernick tell his own story, and it's the police brutality that he was protesting.
And I think that's important, because, like, you take Juneteenth. People may say, well, you know what, July 4th. Well, I mean, let's be real. When the Declaration of Independence was written, you weren't talking about us. We were not part of that. Let's
Right.
just put that out there, Pastor. Right? And I think we forget, and it's almost like people want me to forget the history. I can't. We weren't taught it, first of all. But once you start learning about Black Wall Street and all of these things, and people want to talk to us about burning buildings and violence, and I read the history books that show that they're the ones that started the violence.
Yes.
It's like Black Wall Street. You say that we don't know. There were Black people were thriving in Tulsa, Oklahoma, in that community, and they burned it down because of the situation that happened with the woman, saying that the black man, and it's always that. Now, I'm going to bring this up because I know this is a very controversial topic too. To Kill a Mockingbird. Everybody knows Monroe for To Kill a Mockingbird. But let's just keep it real, Pastor. This is a story. They say it was fictional, but this is a story. As a writer, you can say that, but that doesn't mean anything. I say my book is fictional, but half the stuff in there, I did it. Okay.
Right.
But you say fictional. Let me just tell you guys, you say fictional so you don't get sued by the people that you could be talking about. So we talk about the white women, the black men. That is deep in our history. Why would I celebrate a story that brings that up? And it's being glorified. We memorialize it. It's everywhere. All of it. And I take offense to it because I'm like, in that story, a black man was accused of raping a white woman, and he really didn't do it, but he was found guilty anyway. And they tell me this is a story about justice. Please help me understand. Now, you're familiar with To Kill a Mockingbird, correct? Yes. Okay. So help me understand. Help my unbelief, Pastor, because I don't see it.
Yeah, I can't. For me, that's like every King Day celebration when everyone is in the room talking about how great King was. You can't take injustice, even in this historical setting and make it right. Maybe it's poetic, fictional in some sense, but even fictional, as you just said, represents a story. Fictional represents something. And so we have to just keep, as you have said, the way you're doing, speak out about it, because unless you speak out about it, when we sing, when, they never talk about, when they talk about Kaepernick, or he's disrespecting the flag. Well, we never talk about High and Night song. We talking about bombs bursting in midair. That's an act of war and violence. And so some things we have celebrated, we need to pull back on and say, whoa, maybe this is not acceptable after all. And much of that is in our literature.
And I think it's interesting because so many things, I know when I was growing up in Monroe County High School, and I don't know how if it was at J.F. Shields, but we were taught, from that same little government book, learning about white history. Let's just put it out there. It's real. And at some point in our life, because people have told me, they say, oh, Monroeville has always been a racist place. I'm learning now. I'm getting ready to read a story about these 4 Black men that just went missing. And I think they were lynched or something. I want to, I don't want to talk about it now because I know nothing about it. And I want to get to know, because history is important, but people want us to bury it. Is that why we don't fight? Because it's like we have just, you know what? I don't want to think about it. I don't want to know about it. But how important is it? Because you got kids growing up right now that don't know their history. Right. At some point, we have to leave something for our kids. Yeah. So that they'll know this is where you came from. I mean, look at you. You had people, and it wasn't white people that sat there and told you that you were only going to be good enough for certain things. It was us. Why do we work against ourselves so much? Right. And will we ever be able to handle that part? Because you don't see the Asians really doing it. Right. You know what I'm saying? Why have we not been able to figure this out? And does it have something to do with the house nigger, the old nigger mentality?
Yeah. You make a good point. Alabama is my birth state, so I always salute Alabama.
Right.
Some of the things we've been able to do in Connecticut as part of a greater body of legislators, and then we have forced the African American curriculum into the school curriculum, where you're going to know African American history. It's not just going to be some lost person running through some parts on the continent of Africa, uninformed. But no, you're going to learn proper history. And I think one thing other cultures do better than us, they make sure it's in their curriculum, but they don't leave it to the curriculum. So if you're growing up in a Jewish home, some stuff you're going to learn because you're growing up in that home. And for us as African Americans, we need to start incorporating some of those things in our very culture. But, James Cone, probably the father of Black theology, said, you struggle all week long trying to find your identity. Then you come and sit in the Black church and you look up, and who do you see? A white Jesus who saved you. So it is not just what we are missing at home, but it's also what we are missing in the church. Because in the church, we have all these white images. Once early Christian writers were able to take what we said the Jewishness out of Jesus, then everything became white. Even the language we use today, somebody being the black sheep of the family, or this was a dark day,
savages, stuff like that, and that's
language.
Yeah,
we do it. So we have to figure out a way. Even if we can't get it in our school system in some places, where we have to make sure that it is part of our heritage and be proud of who we are.
Wow. Because I think that is so key. A lot of us still don't know where we've come from and what advances we've actually made. Right. And they keep that from us for a reason, obviously. Because I go back to the way, I don't know if you're familiar with how the elephant was trained, Pastor. Yeah. But the elephant was trained in a way that he was so great that these trainers knew that if we're going to ever get him under submission, we have to find a way to control him.
Right.
And I think about that. That's the same way they did slaves.
Right.
they're supposed to be great, but we got to find a way to control them and make them think they're not. Because the elephant is the largest mammal on the land, but he was not the king of the jungle. You know, and I think I use that mindset and that analogy because so often we allow people to say what we're not supposed to be, what we can't be, what we can't do. I mean, I had that type of situation happen to me too, and I use that because when you compare the two, the elephant. But I want to talk about this moving further. Once the elephant is in that cage and they're beating him up because they wanted him to just keep fighting. You know, he kept fighting. They didn't want him to keep fighting. He kept fighting. He wanted out. And I guess they were looking at him when he gets tired of fighting, then we'll let him out. We'll let him go there and get a little water, but we're going to put him back in the cage because we need to let him know what time it is. Because what happened to the elephant, for real, is that when they let him out, he didn't even run. And I think that that's what happens to us, is that we're free and we don't want to run because they mess with our head. And how do we get past that? Because some people have evolved from that. Some people are accomplishing great things in the African American community, but we can't forget about those who haven't gotten it yet, and we can't put them down. And where do they go? Because if the church is telling you, well, that's just how it's going to be for you, that's contradictory to what God said, you know? So how do we got to find a way to get over the fence, Pastor?
Yeah. You know, and I think a lot of it starts with the church and being prophetic. You know, the church has to recognize, and though both of these are religious terms, but the church needs to recognize if it's going to be prophet, priest, or pastor. And you have to have a great combination of all three. You know, pastor is that one that will give you comfort and say, we're going to get through this. Priest is the one who's going to give you a ceremony because it is just the one that we do. But the prophet is the one who stands up and says, no, we demand that something will get done today. So we have to have that strong Black presence in our church, that language of protest. You know, it used to be a time when politicians would come to our church to speak. No, you want to come to my church? I have questions for you that I'll tell you about when you get to church. And then I let you get up and address those questions. But you don't have a prepared speech you're going to come here and give for your re-election. We don't do it like that, okay? So we'll tell you, here's some questions we need you to answer when you get here, all right? So we have to take, and the church has to be that prophetic voice. We are compelled, my church, every church is compelled now to say, since our doors have been closed, though we've been open in the virtual world, but since our doors have been closed for over a year, what has the community missed other than not having a place to go? What has the community missed other than by not having another place to go? And if you can't answer that question by saying the community has missed some reading programs, has missed some legal inroads, has missed some opportunities to help our seniors, has missed some opportunities to help our young men and women who are returning back home from prison. Unless we can name some of those things, if the only thing we can name is that, they didn't have a place to go. It was like I said in my sermon on Sunday, people just coming back for a seat. They're not coming back to make a difference. So we have to look ourselves in the face. I have to do it in my church. All pastors have to do it and say, for a year, the church doors were closed, though the virtual world was open. But what did this community, my church is on this street, what did this community miss because we were closed? And get back to the table. Get back to the table. What is our vision? Why do we exist? Let us preach the gospel. We're the church down the street doing that. Why do we exist? We're to save souls. Well, Jesus did that. Why do we exist? And to keep pressing that question until our churches can have some kind of social aspect to its ministry. I don't mean to go all that old preacher, but I just
no. That you know what? I'm wondering, like, where are the ministers who think like you? Because you represent something that people need to hear. People need to know that it's okay to be angry. When you see George Floyd down there begging for his life, saying he can't breathe, don't let me go to church and tell me I need to just forgive that, because I'm not hearing you. Because you're trying to be fake with me, and I'm not trying to hear that, because I am angry, and that is an okay emotion, because Jesus got angry and he turned over the tables.
Yes.
I think what America needs to be worried about is if we don't just decide, you know what, we're just gonna get everybody back and do a Nat Turner, So I don't like how we try to make excuses. Well, there's something wrong with you because you're angry about that. Don't you love? You just got to trust God, Ella. And it waters all of this Christianity, and it gets lost because you're trying to represent something that even Jesus didn't represent. And people are not excited about the church anymore, Pastor, because there's so many mixed messages.
Right. That's what I'm, like I keep going back to, to that question. Trust God. You trust in God. You're telling me trust God to do what? To vote? No. You're telling me to trust God to challenge injustice? No, that's something I'm supposed to do. So what is it that you really want me to trust God to do? I should be trusting God to do something I cannot do. And all this other stuff, yeah, I can take part in this. I can sign a petition. I can say this is something that we need to talk about. I can say that here's an effort I want to put my sweat and tears behind. That's something that I can do. I got to trust God for some big stuff, but no, I can trust God to give me the power to do what God has called me to do.
Because I mean, and I'm glad you're saying that, because it's like Martin Luther King, I think a lot of times he's misrepresented. And I think a lot of it is because people want him to be this certain way. And he really, when he went to the White House, he didn't go there just for a picture, a photo opportunity. Okay. Right. He went there. I remember he would go there and he would have an agenda that he'd want to talk to the president about. And they would say, well, no, Martin, let's do it this way, buddy. We'll catch you later. We'll get it later. And he would say, no, we're going to keep marching until you figure it out.
Right.
But now these people, these ministers, and I want to speak on this because, it's just burning in my spirit.
Yeah.
I just got to hear it come from you because I'm curious to what you think about it. When the ministers went to the White House and they sat with then President Trump, and it was with the guise of prison reform or what have you, but they didn't really talk about any of that. And now you had these ministers trying to convince us that this was God because we got a seat at the table. Martin Luther King talked about the seat at the table, but what did he represent that these guys didn't?
From what I know about the that invitation is that some of those pastors had not been completely informed by other pastors who had been informed but did not share the information. Like some pastors only heard that they would not be allowed to speak a couple of minutes before the president stepped into the room. Other pastors knew that was going down. And I believe some of those pastors would have gotten up and would have walked out if they had known they would not have the opportunity to speak. But that's the way, the system does. You're in a room, you think you're going to have an open discussion, and someone comes out and says, hey, president is coming in, tight schedule. You'll only be here for 3 minutes. You got a statement he would like to make. Unfortunately, he's not going to take any questions, but we thank you for being here. That's the time to excuse yourself and find a camera and a mic and start talking.
I want to go back to one of the other things that we talked about, because a lot of people that follow the Johnny D story, this is, if you're just tuning into the broadcast, I'm taking excerpts from the book Circumstantial Evidence by Pete Early, and this is just another one of those. After the jury's decision was announced, Judge Key informed the courtroom that it was merely a recommendation. Under Alabama law, he could either accept it or impose his own sentence. He asked Johnny D if there was anything he wanted to say. He was giving Johnny D one final chance to beg for mercy. And Johnny D says, I didn't kill that girl, Johnny D declared. Me and Ralph Myers ain't been no friends, and Ralph Myers never been in my truck no kind of way. Ralph Myers told some of the biggest lies. Ralph Myers don't know a bit more about me than a man in the moon. He paused. He was trying to think about what to say next. Now, if you have been following the story, you know that what Judge Robert Key did at this point is he says, you know what? I know you guys chose for him to have life in prison, but he changed it. He used his judicial override to invoke the electric chair, death by electrocution. Now, I want people to think about that, because, it's like, oh, Ella, but no, that hurts. That should hurt when you hear that, because that was the value he placed on a Black life, which is no different than George Floyd Emmett Till, any of these people that we protested about, and we keep having to protest about. So if that mindset was back in 1986 and we're in 2021, I just, do people need to pay attention to this, or should they just say, well, that was a long time ago? No, it's still happening.
They must remember, out of all of the judges Trump put in place, not one was a person of color. So those are the judges that we're going to face as we go forward. And any judge who has to be reelected by the state reps and senators, they need to hear, those state reps and senators need to hear from the constituents. And because judges have a lot of power, a lot of leeway, and a lot of authority. And so the courts and the legislatures will probably not change the power that a judge has. So the things we have to do, we have to change the person who's in the seat. And that's what we have to work hard for.
Wow. Well, you know what? This has been a awesome conversation, because you have, I like the way that you take a stand for just what's right. And I like the fact that you call me out on that petition. It says, Ella, push harder.
Yeah.
Make the people who did it to Johnny D be accountable as well.
And
yeah, and I, even though, I think that this is a perfect opportunity for the church to stand up for the people, because you have people sitting in your congregation that have been victimized by racism.
yes, yes.
They're going through it, and they're sitting there listening to these pastors say, just trust God. Well, then why don't you trust God to pay for those lights and stop begging for money?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I had to go there. Because I had to get it off my chest. But you can't have it both ways, is my point. Either you want me to trust God and trust that the system will work for us, but stand up. Because why are we going to sit down and pray if we went and through all this trouble to get the civil rights movement and the Civil Rights Act signed and Voting Rights Act? Why are we going to just sit down and pray? Then why don't we just sit down and pray from the beginning? Right. And just pray away those water fountain signs and those colored only bathrooms? Why didn't we just pray that away? We had to take action. Right. So what's the difference if it's still there? The Civil Rights Act did not free us. The Emancipation did not free us. We're still dealing with the same stuff. Even with video and live TV, people are dying.
Right.
So why do we think that we got to just lay down now?
We have to find the people who are willing to fight and are willing to go, because some will not. Why? I don't know. Much of it, I think what you brought up earlier, much has to do with this. Maybe a person is more likely to say, okay, let's just pray about it, if that person has not had some prior experience of police brutality. But I remember when I was in seminary and I had a car stolen and I called the police. When the police arrived, they accused me of stealing my own car. Here I am, a broke seminary student who can't even afford to put gas in my car. Do you think I'm really going to steal it? If I'm going to steal it, what am I going to do with it? And so I think for those of us who have those experiences, we need to hold on to them, because it is easy to say, you know what? They're not going to treat me like that. I'm one of the boys. I'm one of them. I'm cool. Don't fool yourself. No, you're not. No, you're not. You're still just like me and everybody else. We still have to fight. And so we have to find the people who are willing to fight, and knowing that my comfort, if I reach quote unquote a place I call comfort, that does not release me from the fight, that I still have to fight for someone else. I remember meeting, I forget his name now, but the mayor of Los Angeles several years ago. I was out speaking on an education project, and he said to me, Stallworth, do you know the purpose of the first? And I'm like, no, it's just a trick question. It's like, no. He said, do you know the purpose of a first? If you're the first to do this, first to do that, do you know the purpose of the first? And I said, no. What is the purpose? He said, to open the door for others.
Wow.
So sure that when we get in positions as politicians in law enforcement and leadership, we are not just there to open the door, go in and take a seat and close it, but we are there to open the door for others to come behind us.
Now, let me ask you a question. Now, this may put you on the spot a little bit, and you could tell me, I'm not going to answer that question, and I'll still love you. It'll be all good.
Well, go answer that question.
And it's all good. I just I feel it, so I just need to ask it. Should the elected officials in Monroeville get behind this petition?
I won't answer for those, and that's probably some political part of me. I won't answer from them, but what I will answer is that justice needs to be supported. Uh, and when we support justice, we need to do it in a way where we have to take the personalities off the table. We have to take the characters off the table. We're talking justice, whether that's for Johnny D, Gwendolyn P, or whomever. We're talking justice, and we have to keep talking justice, not personalities, but justice. Because if we start talking personalities, the story will get retold, and we will always lose the essence of the story because we're talking personality. Because if you look at my life long enough, look in the life of everybody long enough, you're going to find some stuff. It's there. I tell people I don't have a skeleton in my closet. I got a body. I mean, skin and organs. It's the whole thing there.
Not the whole thing.
I got the whole thing, not just the skeleton. I almost have a community. So if you look in my closet, you will find something. So we have to stop lifting up personalities, because what happened? Somebody's hurt in our community. The first thing that the other community wants to talk about, oh, that was a bad person. That person did X, Y, Z. No, you're missing the point. That person deserved justice. And so we have to keep fighting for it, keep signing petitions, keep pushing hard, because we are trying to change the community. Dr. King talked about the beloved community. Jesus talked about the kingdom of God. But it's a place of community fellowship where we are equals. So I'm not trying to fight for my justice. My justice is given to me because I'm in human existence with you and with others.
Well, I have, tell us about some of the places that you've traveled that stick out to you, that, just have resonated with you in this fight for justice, because it comes from somewhere.
First place is probably Beatrice. That's the first place. And that's not somewhere I traveled from. That's where I was born. And to think back at the tenacity and strength that those persons must have had to fight, knowing they could get killed and nothing would have been done
about it.
Nothing. And yet, I think about my father, and I think about other persons, Mr. Ezra Cunningham, H.B. Williams, women, all who went and stood at the polls to vote, to show up to vote when they, went into what would have been the all-white elementary school in Beatrice, and they carried their kids there. The boldness and the strength that they had were like, my goodness, they had something that I want. They had part of it. And I think a couple other places that would stand out is actually another place I served, which is in Des Moines, Iowa. And when I was there, you probably wouldn't find 2 or 3 Black families living side by side anywhere. That just didn't have many. But yet how persons could still stand up and fight for justice, knowing you will not always have the masses. You will simply have those who are willing to go. And, I can mention, some of my experiences in Taiwan and other places beyond the United States of the world. But a final place that I mentioned is right here. It's right here at home in Connecticut, the state of Connecticut. God has given me the honor to serve the East End Baptist Church, where one of the former pastors invited Dr. King to Bridgeport. And this is a church that has a long history of protest. And so to them, because I don't have to convince them of the fight. I can invite them to join the fight. And that's what we do together. We try to be a church when we could baptize. I mean, we take you down in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost and bring you up there and ask you, have you registered to vote? While you're still dripping wet.
I love it.
Have you registered to vote?
I love it.
And we invite people. We don't get caught up in personalities and characters, but we invite people from different struggles, different aspects to say, at the end of the day, we're the family of God. So whether you're Black, white, brown, gay, straight, around, whatever you are, you are part of God's family, and we embrace you here as we fight to have a community of faith.
Well, the next time I'm in Connecticut, well, the only time I've ever been to Connecticut, I'm definitely going to come to your church.
Please do.
Because that is what people need to hear, Pastor. Because we're losing people because of the politics. And something has to go, because with the politics, there's no room for Jesus.
Right.
Because with the politics, you're running the sinners away.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? With all the politics, I'm like, well, did you tithe today, Ella? Now you know that check bounce. And you know what I'm saying?
Right.
And now you're making me feel guilty because you told me in church, you said, Ella, we want all the people. If you want to give the God a gift, raise your hand. You know how many times I raised my hand with an empty envelope because I felt pressured to give when I know I didn't have?
Right.
Because I was always taught with your time, you give your time, but I can't put my time in the envelope.
Right.
But they wanted to see something, so I gave them something, an empty envelope. And I felt like I was lying to God because I'm like, and God, he checked me though. He said, you know you ain't got nothing in that envelope. Come on now. And the check you just wrote gonna bounce. Yeah. But I don't like the pressure that the church puts on people because that prohibits them from being able to have a relationship with God with all of these rules. Right. And I think that if we learn and get into the Bible what it really says and teach what God was really all about. And I'm talking to white people. Stop teaching that Jesus had blonde hair and blue eyes. His hair was like the hair under his wig. Okay. And I mean, really, right. But I read because, I attend school at Regent University, that's and they teach a lot of that, stuff that, those theological ideas. But one of the things I learned in one of the essays I had to do was how the reason that white Jesus had to be, they had to make him white was because at that time, they needed everything white to be pure and everything that represented white was good. Right. And that's why I think that you have them now where they're like, well, there's like two different justice systems. Mm-hmm. There's two different Christianity things going on. I hear these people, talking down at people because they want to have an abortion. And I'm like, are we reading the same Bible? Because you can't sit here on 1 minute and tell me that I'm going to die and go to hell because I just aborted my baby. But on the other hand, you just got through calling somebody the N-word and treating them like they're second-class citizen. Right. But you want to pick and choose. It's like we treat the Bible like Chex Mix. We take out the pieces we like and leave the other stuff in the bowl, Yeah. So it's like, I mean, get us ready to get out of here, Pastor. I mean, I really enjoyed this conversation with you because you have really blessed me. You have encouraged me in so many ways. You have no idea, because I'll be honest with you. When you take a stand for stuff like what I'm trying to do and the people that are with me, Anthony Clausell and Sabrina Mass and different people that are saying, oh, I'm in this with you. It does get discouraging at times when the people that you are standing up for are the ones that are standing behind the wall. I'm like, come from back there.
Yeah.
Even if white people didn't give you a right to stand up, Jesus did.
Yes.
So either you don't get to put him out front when it's convenient. Right. If you really believe in who you are and whose you are, tell the white folks that too. And I am glad that I know this, but there are a lot of people that are really struggling with their Christianity because of the politics, and it has to end. It has to end. There's nothing wrong. And I want to say this before I let you have the last word. I want to say this to the people that are watching this broadcast. And if you're just tuning in and you have no idea about the petition, the reason that this became, for those that want to know, well, why in the world did Ella bring this up now? Because justice was never served. Right. And justice is something that we're due. So do we just let it slip and go by? No, we need to pull their coattail. And I think that the movie set the stage for us. Yeah. And I was like, this movie came out. You got Jamie Foxx, Michael B. Jordan.
Yes.
They just paved the way. Take advantage of that. I think it was a setup for us. And when I saw that nothing's being done, I prayed about it. And one day I went to sleep, Pastor, and I saw John A.D. after I had seen this video on YouTube or something after the movie. Because after the movie, it kind of messed with all of us. Right? You didn't even finish your soda.
Right.
You couldn't even read.
All right.
Right?
I'm just there to have fun, have some comfort food.
And it just messed with your spirit. You like, ooh, now I wasn't supposed to feel all this.
Yeah.
But I think it stirred up something because it needed to, because the things that needed to be stirred up had gone dead.
Yes.
And if we keep praying to God, well, God, free us. God, make us better. Enlarge our territory. Okay, well, make that one step. Oh, no. And I think it's fear. Don't tell me not to do it because you're afraid. Because what God put in me, he didn't give it to you.
Right.
He may not have given you that, but he does say that, if you have faith, you can have fear. But I think that fear is a normal reaction to things, but don't stay there and
Right.
try to preach that.
Right.
So I'm going to let you have the last word and talk to the people. And I want you to do something that I've never done on this podcast. I want you to talk to the people, or even before we get out of here, pray for my viewers, because there are people that may be going through financial hardship right now, sick in their bodies. People may not know God. And I want them to get a real relationship with God like I did, because there's nothing like having conversations with God when you're at your worst. The pastor couldn't have gotten me to know God the way I learned him for myself, because sometimes you get so low, pastor, there's no way up. There's nothing but to look up. And that's when we'll call on him, but then let him give you what you need and learn from it. So I want you to do some of that. But before we do this, I want to bring this up, guys. This is the link to the petition. Thank you, Denise, for bringing that up. Guys, please go to this link, sign the petition so that we can get these 1,000 signatures and demand justice, because we have an opportunity, a very unique opportunity to do something that they did not do back in the day. Listen, Johnny D was done wrong, and it could be your son tomorrow. It could be your husband, your uncle. And I know that if we could talk to Johnny D today, God bless his soul, he would tell us, you stand up for what's right. Because Johnny D, after everything that happened to him, when he got out of death row, he was out here speaking about prison reform and about death penalty and how it should be reformed. He was trying to do that, but the system killed him, guys. And it can't end like that. So I am begging you, I'm asking you, I'm pleading with you to please join this petition so that we can take our community back, take our lives back, take our faith back. All right, Pastor.
First of all, let me thank you for the opportunity to be part of this discussion tonight. I'm grateful for the opportunity, and I say to you to keep doing what you're doing. And
yes, sir.
Hard, even when you feel like you're fighting alone. There's a reason Jesus on the cross said, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? Because he felt alone. He felt like his work was in vain. So keep doing what you are doing. I say to those who are watching that this is an open door. This is an opportunity. I am a little boy from Beatrice, Alabama. But because of a love for justice, God has given me a platform to push to help others. And I say to that person who's probably, home thinking, I want to do it, but I'm just afraid. Fear does not lead by invitation. So don't think you can just invite it out and it will lead. But fear does lead by participation, which means do it despite the fear. Make a difference, sign the petition, stand up for justice. And there are some things only God can do. But when we do all that we can do, then God does what we cannot do. So again, thank you so much for the opportunity to share tonight.
Okay. Would you like to pray for my viewers?
I would be delighted. God, we thank you, we love you, we bless you, and we praise your name, and we thank you for the call of justice, whether it's the prophet of Amos or one of the others. God, we know that you call for justice to roll down like waters and righteousness as a mighty stream. We pray for Sister Ellen, for all of her supporters, and for all of those who have listened tonight, that you will empower us, that you will give us another day where justice can be experienced by all of your people. Thank you for giving us the power and the strength. In the name of Jesus, we pray. Amen.
All right, guys. Well, I want to thank all of you who have tuned in to the Ella Johnson Show tonight. Thank you for those of you who have signed the petition. Thank you for all of you who have shared it. I see you. I appreciate it. I mean, I get to say thank you on your post, but I want to personally say thank you so much. That means a lot. And to all of the Caucasian families, that have joined in on this protest. I love you guys too. Thank you. We're going to get this done together. This is a unique opportunity for us to do something that's going to benefit all of us. So I want to thank all of you for doing that. Well, we're going to be back here tomorrow night with a reaction to this broadcast. I'll bring Anthony Clausel. Now, Pastor, you're welcome to come back tomorrow night. You know that. Because I
promise to take a peek in.
Well, you take a peek in. I mean, because if you can join us, it would be awesome. Because next week we will have Pete Early himself, the author of Circumstantial Evidence. Next week, I will be giving away a free copy of the book. But I'll let you guys know what you have to do to get it, because I haven't figured it out yet. But anyway, thank you guys so much. Thank you, Pastor, for being my guest tonight. Thank you all so much. And we'll see you tomorrow night right here on The Ella Johnson Show at 8 p.m. Eastern on YouTube and Facebook Live. We'll see you tomorrow night. Thanks for tuning in to The Ella Johnson Show.